Hi there. Welcome, everyone. My name is Gabrielle Grandel, and I am a National Board and Functional Medicine Certified Nutritionist and Health Coach. And I'm also a certified LEAP therapist at Living Well Dallas. And tonight I wanted to come and talk to you a little bit about genetically modified organisms. So thank you everyone that is joining. Also just wanted to let you know that if you have any questions or comments throughout, please feel free to type them in the chat box and I'll do my best to answer those. So genetically modified organisms, the reason why I wanted to talk about this. Hey Jamie, thanks for joining. Hey Brenda, thanks for supporting. So I wanted to take the time tonight to talk a little bit about genetically modified organisms because I think it's really important for people to know what is in their food. And I also think that we should do our best to try and partner with nature and really use technology to try and empower the capabilities of nature. Versus trying to modify it and create something of our own. I think that's really important. And so that's sort of what's been happening for the last 20 some odd years. So in 1996, genetically modified organisms were introduced into our food supply. And a lot of people still have never heard of them, in 2019. So I found that to be pretty concerning. And so let's talk a little about what genetically modified organisms are. So genetically modified organisms are some kind, that's what GMO stands for, is genetically modified organism, also known as genetic engineered products. And so what they've done is they've taken a combination of animals, plants, viruses, bacteria, and they have manipulated them in a lab into a crop that has a specific sort of trait that they desired. And so the biotech company, Monsanto, that sells lots of different types of herbicides and things of that nature, created some seeds that can withstand massive amounts of their herbicide, their most popular herbicide, which is called Roundup. So you've all probably heard of Roundup before. You may have used it in your yard before. It's a very popular herbicide, and its main active ingredient is something called glyphosate. And so they've developed these crops to be what we call Roundup ready. And so that means that they can withstand massive amounts of Roundup, right? And so the idea is that they could sell more Roundup because they're in it to make money and they are a chemical company. So they can sell more Roundup by making seeds that they can spray billions and trillions of pounds of this stuff on them and they don't die. The weeds die, but the crop itself doesn't die. Hey, Mom, thanks for joining. Hi, Melody and Diana, MJ. Thank you guys for being here. Appreciate it. Hopefully we can, I can shed some light on some things tonight. So we have the Roundup ready crops, and then we also have the BT crops. And so the BT crops, what they do is they are also Roundup ready, but they can produce their own insecticide. So the way they work is they poke holes in the stomach of the bugs that try to feed on them. And and then the bug dies and stops feeding on it. And so that's how that works. And so we have several different genetically modified crops coming down the pike, but the highest risk ones, or the ones that are most commonly found in our country, are corn, cotton, canola, sugar beets, alfalfa. Those are the top 5. So it's corn, cotton, canola, sugar beets, and alfalfa, followed closely by zucchini and yellow summer squash and papaya. There's also some new variety of genetic engineering that is a little bit different than what I'm talking about, but those are for potatoes and apples. They've designed them so that they don't brown when they're sliced. And that's a different kind of technology, but also not one that we want to endorse. But the crops that are Roundup ready are the ones that I just mentioned. And of those crops, the cotton and the canola are the two that are the Bt toxin version. And so those are problematic, and it's good to know which crops that we are looking out for, and which ones to be aware of. And the reason why, some of the reasons why I think this is so important is because there's a lot of issues with genetic modification. So one of the problems with genetically modifying foods is that they've never tested this on humans. So they introduced these foods into our food supply in 1996, and there was never any human studies. And then in fact, there was only one animal study. So, we didn't know what was going to happen when we introduced these crops into nature and the food supply, but went ahead and did it anyway. And there's a lot of collateral damage that could happen from doing something like that. So when you take two different species or two different sets of genes and combine them together, up to 5% of the genetic expression can be changed. So these naturally occurring genes can express very differently when they're genetically engineered than they could if they came from nature on their own. So since there's not been any long-term studies, no one can say for sure whether or not, how these are impacting our DNA and how our genes express. And so I think that's very irresponsible that we did that. But needless to say, it is they are in our food supply now. And so we just want to be aware of how we can minimize our exposure to these things. Hi, Connie. Hey, Andrew. Hey, everybody. Oh, hi, Brandon. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining. So we were just talking about one of the problems with genetically modified organisms, and that's the engineering process itself. Secondly would be the Bt toxin. And so I was explaining how the Bt crops, they work by poking holes in the stomachs of the bugs that feed on them. What they never did was check to see if this trait then carried over into our digestive tracts when we were, say, eating corn chips or corn tortillas. So the Bt toxin, by poking holes in the stomach of the bug that feeds on it, we think that it also pokes holes in our GI tract. And if any of you have known me for a while, or if you worked with me before, you probably heard the concept leaky gut. And so I'm just going to give kind of a brief overview of that here. But basically, our intestines are supposed to have a really strong barrier. And that's so that we can keep everything, that we can metabolize all of our nutrition and utilize our food that we eat. And then we send what we don't want, the rest of it, to the toilet. But the way that we get the nutrients into our system is that they come through our GI tract after they've been broken down into very small pieces, and they come through our GI tract into our bloodstream so we can absorb them. But what happens in someone with the leaky gut is larger molecules can now come across, chemicals, bacteria, proteins, things that were not supposed to ever be exposed to the immune system, and they're being exposed because there's a breakdown in the lining of the gut. So now now the immune system sees it as a foreign invader, and it's going to create a whole anti-inflammatory cascade against those foods. And so lots of conditions can come as a result of that. Tons of autoimmune conditions where now that the body sees whatever this protein was that came across, the body sees that as a foreign invader. Now it tells every member of the immune system, okay, anytime you see anything that looks like this, I want you to attack it. And so in an effort to actually help you, you start to then attack your own tissue. So now let's attack the thyroid, or let's attack the pancreas, because we can't really, our immune system gets confused when there's too many foreign invaders in the system at once. Somebody has a question. Let's see. Jamie, can you elaborate on the harm with it in cotton? So the cotton and the corn are the two BT crops. And so they're a little more problematic than the other Roundup Ready crops. And one of the problems that I think of first and foremost with cotton is not that we're ingesting lots of cotton necessarily, but that we are wearing it on our skin, but also, ladies, that we are using it in tampons and pads. And so, you know, you're putting that into a big mucous membrane that's soaking up all of those toxins. And so, so I think about cotton in that way, as it being, you know, more problematic for feminine products and things like that, but also that we're wearing it and that kind of thing, not that we're ingesting it as much. But that's a really great question. And let me know if I didn't answer your question, Jamie, and I'll be happy to try to answer it better. So those are a few of the things that are a problem with GMOs. Also, thirdly, is maybe even the most significant, is the glyphosate, is the Roundup that is sprayed on these crops. So the main ingredient in Roundup is something called glyphosate. And in 2015, the World Health Organization actually defined glyphosate as a known carcinogen, as an animal carcinogen and a probable human carcinogen, so a cancer-causing agent. So that's a big red flag, right? Also, whenever glyphosate was first introduced, it was actually patented as a chelator. So what they used it for was to clean pipes and clean the mineral scaling off of the pipes. And so what it does is it's a chelator, so it grabs onto those minerals to remove them. It binds to them and removes them. So it has that same mechanism of action when it's used to kill plants. So part of what it does is it hugs all of the minerals from the soil and starves that from the crop, from the plant. So the crop itself becomes very mineral deficient. And then the biggest consumers of those crops are livestock. So our factory farm animals and cows and pigs and things, that's what they eat. So the animals are eating the nutrient depleted crops, and then they are becoming nutrient depleted. And then we as humans are eating both the nutrient depleted animals and the nutrient depleted crops. Okay, and then on top of that, there's a little bit of there's some glyphosate residue they found that's still left over when we eat the crop from it being sprayed with massive amounts of this stuff. So by the time we eat it, there's also a little bit of residue left over. And so any leftover minerals that were available are now going to be hugged and chelated by the glyphosate, making them unavailable to us, right? So, hey, Atar. Hey, Jason. Hey, Aaron. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining. So I was just telling everyone, if you have any questions throughout, this is not that much longer, but if you have any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat box, and I'll be happy to answer them. Or if you have any comments, please feel free. So it's a chelator, taking away our minerals from our plants and our animals, and then ultimately from us. It's also an antibiotic. So the BT crops are actually registered as pesticides because they kill insects. That's their job. So we're eating foods that are registered as pesticides. And as some of you may or may not know, our good, healthy gut bacteria do a lot of good work for us, and we need to have plenty of good bacteria in our system. When we take antibiotics or we're exposed to antibiotics like through genetically modified crops and the glyphosate that's on them, that wipes out our good bacteria oftentimes. And it allows kind of a breeding ground for the bad bugs that cause a whole list of side effects that we don't want. So the ones that are good that we pay money for are getting wiped out by this glyphosate. And so that's a problem. And so we've got the fact that it's a chelator, we've got the fact that it's a carcinogen, and that it's an antibiotic. So those three things together are pretty problematic in my eyes. And I also just think if there wasn't any problems with this, then why can't we label it? Why can't we tell people what we're doing and have some studies that prove efficacy around these products? So those are some of the major kind of complaints or challenges when it comes to genetically modified crops. And so I'm just reading Jamie's comment. I know all about that. Okay, so I'm assuming that I've answered your question, but please feel free to let me know if not. So those are some of the problems. And so how do we know what are genetically modified crops and how can we avoid them? That can be a concern. So number one, if we buy organic, then we are by definition not buying genetically modified crops. Now, can some of the herbicides and some of the things kind of get to the organic crops in the water or in the air? You know, of course they can, unfortunately. But the actual organic crop itself, if we buy them USDA organic with the stamp, then they are not genetically modified. So that will be on processed foods as well as animal products. You should see the USDA organic stamp. And I hope that you guys can see this. I'm going to hold it real close to the camera. The USDA organic stamp is this circle right here. And it comes in different colors. It doesn't matter what color it is, just as long as it has this stamp. We also have what's called the non-GMO project verified stamp that has this little butterfly on it. So the non-GMO project is a nonprofit organization that has come together to pledge not to use genetically modified organisms in their products. They're not monitoring glyphosate, they're not monitoring anything else, but they have said that they're not going to use GM ingredients. So that's another trusted source. So if you buy processed foods like this tea, for example, or crackers or something of that nature, it's good to look for both of those stamps. When it comes to produce, we don't have a big organic stamp. Sometimes we have a sign that says, hey, this is the section for the organic. But if we don't know and we're not sure, one of the things that we can look for is the barcode that is on the produce itself. So it will start with either a 9, a 4, or an 8. If it starts with the number 9, that means it's organic. If it starts with the number 4, it's conventional. And if it starts with the number 8, it's genetically modified. So those are also some ways that you can decipher between the two. So what we can do is we can try to not buy the genetically modified crops, the ones that I mentioned, which are corn, cotton, canola, sugar beets, alfalfa, zucchini, and summer squash, and papaya. We can make sure we buy all those things organic if we are going to consume them. And that would be one way to go after it. But what we're learning now, unfortunately, is that glyphosate is actually being used as what's called a desiccant. And so they are spraying it on crops before they go to harvest to kind of dry them out. And these are not genetically modified crops. These are things like oat and barley and rye and a lot of things I think about, like in our breakfast cereals, are some of the most common crops that are being sprayed with this glyphosate. And so it's really hard to avoid, unfortunately, unless we buy organic crops. So I really want to encourage you to do that. I know the budget doesn't allow sometimes for us to buy everything organic. That would be the best for our bodies and for the environment. But if we don't have the funds to do that, I always tell my clients, think about, number one, buy your animal products organic. Grass-fed, pasture-raised, grass-finished, wild-caught fish, because the fish won't have the organic stamp, but wild-caught is a good way to go there. But the animal products, that's very important. Number two is to buy the GMO crops that we've talked about, to buy those organic. And remember, it's not just, corn on the cob, right? It's all of the different things that corn might be in: corn chips, corn tortillas, corn starch, etc. That's how it made it, to 94% of our crop being genetically modified. So we want to buy GMO crops organic, number two. And then number three is what's called the Dirty Dozen and Clean 15 list that I'm going to reference. This is from the Environmental Working Group. And I'm going to actually type that down in the chat box in case you guys want to look this up. So it's from the Environmental Working Group, also known as the EWG, which is a nonprofit organization that watches out for our environment. In my opinion, a much better job than the Environmental Protection Agency, who's supposed to be protecting us, but maybe not doing a great job with that. So the Environmental Working Group has the Dirty Dozen and Clean 15 list, and they update it every year. So they just released the 2019 version, and they've made a few changes, including adding kale to the dirty list. So if you pull this up, you could download this, you could have it, on your phone when you go shopping, or just, take a look. But anything that's on the Dirty Dozen list would be the dirtiest. So we would want to buy those organic as well, because they have the most amounts of herbicides, pesticides, fungicides, not only on the outside of the produce, but also on the inside. And when you look over the list, you'll see that a lot of these are things with thin skin, or things where you eat the skin, but that's not a hard and fast rule. So again, just to recap, what you want to put your priority, put your money in terms of for priority, in my opinion, is animal products, number one, number two, the GMO crops that I mentioned, and then number three, buying the Dirty Dozen. Then if everything else is conventional, then so be it. Just knowing that the more organic that we buy, the more nutritious it is for our bodies, the better it is for the environment, and the more we can support organic farming and get back to nature and the way we were doing it for so long successfully, and away from this man-made, lab-made, creations that our body doesn't really know what to do with. And we're having a lot of digestive problems and cancers and things like that seem to highly be correlated with the introduction of genetically modified foods. It's not, causation. It doesn't mean that is exactly what is happening, but there sure seems to be a lot of correlation. And it's as a side note, it's unfortunate because there's not a lot of opportunity to do any testing, because the people that own these seeds don't really allow for that. So it's a big challenge. And of course, these things are not labeled because there's been a big effort to keep everyone in the dark about what's going on. So I thought it was really important to come on and talk to you guys about this topic and see how we can all kind of work together to try and swing the pendulum. In several other countries, GMOs are banned. They don't allow them. And that's because the consumers came together and educated themselves and said, we are not going to buy your products. And once these companies started losing shareholds and started losing profit, then they decided they better start making things that are not genetically modified. So we're just sort of behind here. And it's not, because we're not interested, it's because there's a big effort to kind of keep us uninformed. But I think we can fight against that by voting with our dollars and spending it on things that we know that make a difference. And so that's one resource that you can look at, the Environmental Working Group. Hey, Zach. Let me see, Jamie, you responded to my question. Yes, I was just referring to me not having any good bacteria and the bad taking over. Yes, absolutely. So Jamie's one of my clients. I don't think she'll mind me telling you that. And we did some testing on her, and she didn't have a lot of good guys. And so she was just speaking to that there can be a whole list of complaints and symptoms that happen when we don't have enough good guys and we have too many bad guys overgrowing. So we don't want to introduce anything else into our system that is going to wipe out our good flora like glyphosate can do. So those are some ways that we can avoid it. I also wanted to share with you a couple of resources in addition to the Environmental Working Group. I'm going to type a few of them here. One is called justlabellit.org. And so that's, of course, about labeling genetically modified foods. We have the Institute for Responsible Technology.com. Institute for Responsible Technology.com. I don't think I spelled that right, actually. Sorry about that, but that's what it is, Institute for Responsible Technology.com. A lot of reviewed science on this for you to take a look. Jeffrey Smith is sort of the GMO guru here, and he has a lot of good information on his website. Also, the Organic Consumers Association is another company to follow and be in the know about what's going on with food safety. And also, there's going to be a documentary. I don't think it is out yet, but it's called Secret Ingredients. So if you go to secretingredientsmovie.com, I believe, then you can look into this documentary about eating organic and how it has transformed people's lives, moving away from genetically modified foods to less modified foods and more organic foods. So my hope tonight was that I could just shed some light on this topic of genetically modified organisms. My hope is that you can take some steps to start to try and move away from GMOs in your life, and that you can start trying to buy more organic foods as much as you can, or at least try to reduce your total toxic burden. We live in a toxic world, and so if we can minimize that to the best of our ability, we're really going to be helping ourselves in the long run, and helping the environment and our future children, that are impacted by all of these choices that we're making every day. So I hope that this was helpful. And I'd like to see if anyone has any questions or comments. If so, please put them in the chat box. And I also wanted to let you know that we can test for glyphosate levels. So we can test for lots of different things here. I do lots of functional testing, nutrition, hormones, gut health, otherwise. But one of the cooler tests that's out now is a toxin test. And it tests for lots of different environmental toxins, but one of them is glyphosate. And so it's really interesting to see the levels of glyphosate that come back in some people, and how when we move away from these genetically modified foods, I don't have anybody that doesn't get better. Right. So to me, that's pretty impactful. And I'm not the only provider that has this same kind of testimonies. So I think that we can all help ourselves and help our world and planet and future by moving away from genetically modified foods. I hope that I have helped you to come up with some ways that you can do that and understand why it's so important to do so. If you would like to chat more about how I might be able to help you with any symptoms that you're having, or any testing that you might want to look at, or if you've been told that your labs are normal, but yet you feel like something is off, I invite you to have a free 15-minute phone consultation with me, and we can chat and see if it's a good match. I look at things through a little bit of a different lens, and so there may be room for me to be able to help you reach your goals and help you to get to that level of vitality and health that you deserve. So if you'd like to have a free 15-minute phone consultation, my phone number here is 972-930-0260. And I invite you to give a call, or you can also reach out to me here on Facebook, and I'm happy to help and answer any questions. And if there's any topics that you guys would like for me to cover that you're interested in, please feel free to let me know too, and I'll do my best to make a point to do that. So thank you all so much for joining tonight on this rainy evening. I appreciate you educating yourself, and I hope that you take this information and educate others. And thank you so much for being here. Have a great evening.